Hi, I'm Rob, and in this Gems of War video, I'm going to go over immunity traits. These are traits which prevent a particular status effect from being applied, effectively countering it. This is really important in game modes like PvP if you take it seriously, and particularly Guild Wars, so really important to know what each status effect does and how to effectively counter it. Now, some various traits have multiple ways of countering it. For example, Deathmark. Deathmark, you can have Undying, that makes you immune to Deathmark and a few other things, or Warded is the direct counter to Deathmark, it makes you just immune to Deathmark. But I'm concentrating mainly here on the direct immunity traits to each one. But it is important to know that the trait Invulnerable prevents all negative status effects on a particular troop, and the trait Impervious prevents all negative status effects on that troop except for Cursed. So first up, Burn or Burning. It's an effective way of doing slow but sure damage to a troop or team, but more importantly, if you're playing a Skull team and in a class that has the Fireblade talent, you're leaving yourself open to that awesomely destructive triple skull damage to burning enemies. Really dangerous, so a really good counter to that is Fireproof, immunity to burning and Fairy Fire. Speaking of Fairy Fire, that is what is up next. A troop afflicted with Fairy Fire, as it says, will take 50% extra damage from damaging spell effects with a cumulative 10% chance to recover each turn. So that is going to be really damaging if you're Fairy Fired, and as we just saw, the way to counter that is with Fireproof. So Fireproof, a very good defense against burning and Fairy Fire. Next up we have Curse. Now Curse is one of the most underrated status effects actually in the game. A lot of people don't realise how powerful it is. Like imagine you got a team where you got Zul'Goth, you got Arachnian Weaver in your team, they're impervious, they can't be touched by those status effects. Curse absolutely can ruin all that. When you get Curse, it dispels the positive status effects, all status immunities are ignored, and it can apply to impervious troops. It effectively makes them a completely normal troop and can be then prone to any status effect in the game. And the immunity trait to Curse is Blessed. As it says there, blessed troops are cleansed and impervious to all negative status effects, Devour, Mana Burn and Mana Drain. So if you don't want to be cursed, get Blessed. And this is why the Wander Stars is such an important weapon in the game, because it has the option to bless and curse, making it particularly powerful. Next up we have Deathmark. Deathmark is very powerful. Deathmark, you get a 10% chance to die each turn, but there is a cumulative 10% chance to recover each turn. But the direct counter to Deathmark is Warded, immunity to Deathmark. As I mentioned earlier, Deathmark is one of the ones which has various immunities. Warded, you can have Undying, and you can also have like the basic Impervious. Next is Disease. Disease halves the mana a troop gains. This is actually really effective. It takes effectively twice as long to get the mana required to cast a spell, or twice as many turns. So actually very effective. So if you don't want to be diseased, get Immune. Immune gives you direct immunity to disease and lycanthropy. A little bit like Deathmark though, there are various other ways to get immunity to disease, such as Fortitude and Undying. Next we have Entangle, a really effective way of stopping skull damage. Entangled troops have their attack reduced to 0 with a cumulative 10% chance to recover each turn. And the direct counter to Entangle is Nimble. No more Entangle for you if you have Nimble. Next up we have Freeze or Frozen. As it says in the top right there, a frozen troop's spells and mana no longer give extra turns. There's a cumulative 10% chance to recover each turn. But that description is ever so slightly misleading, because it's not effectively a troop which is frozen, it's the colours. So if you were frozen on this, for example, even though it's actually insulated, you would get actually frozen effectively on blue and green. So any other troops in your team that actually use blue or green, even though they've not actually been frozen, you would still not get that extra turn, because it is the colours which are effectively frozen and not the troop. But the direct counter to Freeze or Frozen is Insulated, immunity to Frozen. Next we have Hunter's Mark. Same with a lot of these traits, you can apply Hunter's Mark by various weapons and various troops, but Hunter's Mark doubles damage from skulls. That is really important when fighting a skull based team. So to counter that, you can have Cunning, immunity to Hunter's Mark. Next up we have Poison. Poison on its own doesn't actually seem that strong. Poison troops have a 50% chance to lose 1 life every turn. You can die from it, but the main threat from poison is there's quite a few troops in the game that have a chance to actually kill you outright if you're poisoned in the first place. And the direct counter to poison is sturdy. Next we have Silence. Silence is one of the most powerful traits in the game. Silenced troops cannot collect mana or cast spells, meaning they just literally wasting their turns until they recover. So really powerful. So you do not want to be silenced yourself. And the way to avoid being silenced is to have Alert, immunity to silence. Next we have Stun. Pretty powerful trait this, especially against certain troops. A stunned troop loses the effect of its traits, with a cumulative 10% chance to recover each turn. So if you want to avoid getting stunned yourself, you're gonna need a thick head, making you immune to stun. And lastly we have Web. Web, again, an extremely powerful trait. Webbed troops have their magic reduced to 0. That is really powerful. What that means is on a troop which, say, gives life like this, your magic is the one that's got the little globe thing by it. On my case there it says 40. So with the spell gaining, in this case 41 life for me, with my magic reduced to 0, that would be gain 1 life, which just is almost worthless. And on a damaging troop, like this one for example, that magic would be reduced to 0, meaning I just deal 1 true damage to an enemy rather than the usual 37. Really powerful is Web, so the way to stop Web is Slippery, immunity to Web. No more magic being reduced to 0 when you have Slippery. So there it is, there's the video on status effects and their immunity trait. Remember that some weapons will have the equivalent kind of effect as well, but they're called a different name, which makes things a little bit confusing, but that is for another video. But there it is for this one. If you enjoyed it, why not bash that like and subscribe button, it really does help. But most of all, thanks for watching, and feel free to share the video amongst other Gems of War players, your guild, things like that. Thanks for watching, bye for now.